What's going on, everybody? Back again for another episode of Sunday Reset with Will and Friends. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Aly Vredenburgh. Aly is a nationally recognized mental health advocate, social innovator, and the founder of the Belonging Lab, a nonprofit dedicated to suicide prevention, community healing, and mental wellness through art and education. Aly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad to have you here too. And so, as someone who's kind of been watching from the sides and seeing what you're working on, it's clear you have a passion for working specifically with Gen Z. Can you tell me where that passion sort of stems from?
Well, I'm Gen Z, so I'll start with that. I was born at the very end of Gen Z, 1997. So literally, I'm like at the absolute cutoff. But I'm Gen Z, and I have noticed that I come from a very unique generation. Our generation grew up in very, very different circumstances than any generation before us. We grew up with what a lot of data has shown to be some of the most poverty of any generation. It's been found that during the 2008 to like 2012 housing recession and all of that, most of us grew up like half of us grew up with poverty, which is unlike any other generation. And a lot of us grew up in single parent households more than any other generation. So in that way, things were really different for us. And then we also are the first digital natives. So we're the OG iPad kids.
Like that, the iPad kids. Yeah, I mean, especially I watch it with, I have young nephews and I see them with their iPads and to me, it's like a double-edged sword. It's like on one hand, like, my old school brain, I'm a millennial and in my brain it's like, go outside and play around and stuff. But then it's also like there's something to be said for like their ability to adapt in technology at a fast pace because they were exposed to it so early is such a valuable thing. How do you, as someone who is proudly a member of Gen Z, how do you balance that idea of, being the group that grew up around iPads, as you say it, the OG way?
Well, what I'll say is that what's really concerning is that Gen Z, and I guess another reason why I'm so passionate about it is that we have pretty much the highest rates of depression and anxiety of any other generation as well. So I feel like that balance that you're talking about, or that strange feeling that we grew up with something so different, it's strange. It is strange.
And so what do you think about, is it the technology specifically that you think is leading to the depression, or do you have specific findings that you're finding within your causes?
So, my book, which I actually have right here, I write that it's more complex than you think because truly mental health is so much more complex than people think or talk about. And I do interviews out on the street sometimes, and a lot of people, their very first answer will be, oh, well, it's social media. Obviously, it's social media. And I like to push back on that because I actually don't think social media is like the root cause of the mental health crisis, believe it or not. I think it's one of the factors, but I don't believe it's a root cause. And I would say that it's a whole bunch of different things causing this crisis that have influenced these really high rates of depression, overdose, gun violence, and suicide. So, which those are gun violence, suicide, and overdose are the three leading causes of death in our young people. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening, and I would say that if you read my book, you'll see that, like, literally I think it's like ten root causes, but it's really a lot of different things. I talk about parenting, capitalism, disparities, loneliness, nutrition and exercise, the media, toxins, the fact that college just isn't getting us to the American dream anymore, the fact that we grew up with gun violence. I mean, it's strange our parents grew up with the fear of maybe fires or earthquakes, and we're told to sit under a desk and hope that someone doesn't shoot us. I mean, it's such a different world that we're living in now. And then I also talk about this culture of individualism that has come up and been really, really, it's this very, very toxic culture that seems to be getting worse, and a lot of us are struggling in our friendships and our communities because of this strong culture of individualism.
So there's a lot to unpack there. And I want to get on the
Yeah.
individual. individualism piece because I think that's a really important part of this conversation. But before that, you broadly you're talking about social media not being like the culprit. It's the easy, scapegoat that a lot of people talk about, especially if they don't understand. And I'm actually with you. I think more often than not, what you get out of social media is what you put into it. If you're
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's so much of there. But like for you, I can remember a time before social media, whereas in Gen Z, I don't know that you necessarily can. So how do you think social media impacted the way you grew up?
It was weird because we saw and experienced things before they started changing parental guidance and things like that. I remember there was Yahoo Answers. Did you see Yahoo Answers or Omegle? What else? There was like this Ask FM where people could anonymously post all kinds of things. I remember MySpace was a big thing. I think it still exists, by the way, which I was shocked to see. I'm like, wow, it still exists.
It does. I actually still could remember I had a MySpace in like junior high and I could remember my URL. I can't remember the login stuff to save my life, but I found the URL and I found some old pictures that way. It was pretty funny.
It was the absolute Wild West, and it still is, and I think there was something I read or wrote about in my book how, like, I think there's, like, thousands of things being uploaded every second to, like, YouTube and all these different places, so there's really no way to regulate or like, who knows what's gonna be posted, obviously, things can be taken down, but how quickly they're taken down can any child can be exposed to and see things that they probably shouldn't. But I will say that the impact on us is more nuanced because there's both good and bad to social media and the internet. I think that so there's this show called Hannah Montana.
Okay. I'm
I don't know
familiar.
if you
I'm familiar.
it's I mean, most girls who were teenagers growing up, like, loved that show. I loved that show. And sociologists, some of them attribute that show to being the sort of cultural spark to modern day influencer culture. And I think that that's an important piece to think about because this culture that we feed social media is really at the heart of the beast. If social media was literally just like cat videos and teaching you how to cook and learning and educating people, it wouldn't be harmful. But the people who've created social media, their goal is to make money. So what they've figured out is what are people drawn to? What are people consuming and what do people like? What are they going to consume? And so it's up to us as consumers to decide what we want to consume and what we put our time and effort into consuming. And for some reason, rich bait, misinformation, and all these other horrible things are are ending up being what people consume. That is deeply human and that has existed forever. I mean, you look back to like when women were wearing corsets and like literally fine with dying or like, falling onto couches because they wanted to look a certain way and keep up with the Joneses. It's a culture that's very human that we have, but the algorithm, of course, is bad. It's definitely fueling the fire, and it definitely has created new problems that did not exist before because in the past we could avoid things that we didn't want to see, but now it's all day, every day in your face. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree. But it's because it's interesting. You touched on a really interesting point, which is that I think is gets overlooked. Is that we've always done this. We've always sought validation in other places as an example, right? Like maybe before it was social media, it was the newspaper, or it was just like how you were recognized within your school or whatever the case may be. We just have a different platform. And what social media did was it was, for better or worse, like truly equal opportunity. Anyone could post anything, anywhere, anytime. And so you're fighting for everyone's attention. And it became this huge, I see it in the book conversation. As you know, I wrote a book too, and I'm an independent publisher, and that's exactly how I roll. And there was no way 25 years ago to truly release an independent book unless you were independently wealthy and could afford to print everything on your own, or you found a way to like sell your soul to somebody. Like that was basically the only two options you had if you wanted to be truly like independent. But nowadays, anyone can upload a manuscript to Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, get a book out there, get it going. The problem with that though is everyone is competing because
Yep.
now anyone can do it. the fight for the attention of anybody becomes back in the day, if you wrote a book, it was a big deal because it was really hard to get over that, mostly due to financial barriers, but nonetheless still very hard to accomplish. And so everyone knew about that one book, but now everyone has a book. And so how do you compete with that? We're on a podcast right now. How many people do you know have a podcast? And so the competition for attention, I think, is where it got really interesting. And do you feel that that is where some of the depression, at least in the social media realm, I know it's more bigger than that to you. We'll get to that. But do you think the attention part of it is what's wrong with social media for Gen Z, or do you think there's other contributing factors?
I think it has to do with comparison. Like,
Okay.
comparison was truly the thief of joy, and a lot of it's comparison that's also bullying. Because I have young people who tell me their stories all the time, and I know one girl was saying that there was these boys taking pictures of her secretly in class and then posting them and making fun of her, and it was very, very painful and horrible for her. So that type of online bullying is a big problem for young people, but I would say just it's the comparison that's really, really, I think, dangerous, and then there's dangerous discourse right now surrounding body image, especially for boys and girls who are struggling with this idea of fitting into a certain archetype. And the thing about media is that it both shapes and is a reflection of our culture. So there is a piece of it that does shape our culture because the more that you see something, the more it becomes a norm. And so, like right now, very thin bodies are being pushed out again. And it's concerning for young girls who are being influenced by that, that it is that part of it is pretty dangerous, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I could talk about social media for a while, but you said something else later on that I thought was really important too, which was this individualistic society that we have today. And could you tell me more about what you mean by that?
Well, okay, let me ask you something.
Sure.
How many people do you know in your life that specifically texts you once a day and asks you, "How are you doing?" Truly, and say they're checking in on you?
I mean, I talk to a lot of people every day, but that specifically, how are you doing? I don't know if I have a good answer to that. I don't know that it's that many. To be fair, I'm sure it kind of comes up naturally every day and on a regular basis. Um, Probably not too many, but not to say that I don't talk to people. So it's a good question.
I see you kind of, thinking about that because most of us don't have that. Most people don't have that. I have like one person that does that for me. And I do this work and I talk to a lot of people too. And I think the reason for that is our individualistic culture. We're all just in our own little worlds, our own little bubbles, and we don't really think about the other people in our lives because we're so focused on how the hell do I pay rent? How do I buy food tonight? How do I make sure my dog can go to the vet and afford the vet? And I mean, we're living in a world right now that is very, very hard to meet our basic needs. So I do think that that plays a role into the individualism too, because people are at a place right now economically where they feel very like I can't even think of a good word for it, but it's like desperate times right now, a
The
little bit
struggle
for
is
a lot
real.
of people. Shit feels real.
Yeah.
So, no, but
Yeah.
it really does. Shit feels real right now. I mean, there was a stat that came out. It might be different now, but like a year ago, they said like 70% of Americans can barely afford groceries. When you think about that, that shouldn't be what it is, truly.
Yeah. And it's hard to be present with anybody for, I mean, even the basic question of how are you doing? But I was just talking with somebody about this today. It's like people say, the best things in life are free. Sure. I can wrap my head around the concept that like giving a hug to my wife is an incredible feeling that doesn't come at a cost, right? Understand that. Having said that, it is harder to be present while giving her that hug if in the back of my mind I'm wondering, can I pay for the groceries this month? Can I pay my mortgage or my rent? Can I do these things? It's harder to be present in those wonderful moments, albeit free moments, when you have this financial worry on the back of your minds.
Exactly, exactly. So I would say, and it's interesting because mental health affects everybody, right? Like it affects people who are rich, people who are poor, people who are, doing amazing. But I think that the reason why, like if you really like look at it, it has to do with whether or not someone is under stress, whether they're getting good sleep, and whether they have good nutrition, and then community. Like, those are kind of the big things that people need. So a lot of maybe wealthier people who are under a lot of stress and not sleeping well and don't have community, like, you see it in those populations too. But the thing is that for especially people who are living paycheck to paycheck, that is a stress that could be alleviated if we made changes. If that I don't know if that makes sense, but that's something I really argue for in my book is that people cannot have good mental health unless their basic needs are met.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's interesting. I was having this conversation with a friend the other day. We were talking about the community angle of what you're talking about. We said you've heard this on social media, people talking about the need for a third place, right?
Yes.
You have work, you have home, where's that third place you meet? And that's where the conversation got interesting because I said, I think part of the problem, there's a lot of problems with it, but the one that stands out to me is when you think about what a third place commonly is, it usually comes at a certain cost.
Okay.
In certain parts of a culture, it's going to a pub or bar, or it's going even to a restaurant if you don't drink, and that's fine. But going to a restaurant or going to an activity of some sort on a regular basis usually comes with some type of cost associated to it. And so if you're struggling, as you said, to put food on the table and make ends meet, you damn sure can't afford to like go grab a drink with your friends or go have dinner somewhere not at home with ramen noodles. So then you're not afforded the opportunity to go find that third place.
And that is exactly what you're saying right now is exactly why I started my nonprofit and what I'm trying to change with my nonprofit.
Okay.
It's it's interesting because I'm navigating such a weird society that we're in right now because there are a lot of opportunistic entrepreneurs right now that are seeing exactly what you're saying. We need more third spaces and more events and ways to connect people because people are lonely and people are really wanting connection right now. And one thing I've really decided in the work that I'm doing is that I do not ever want to charge people for connection. I think it's wrong, and I think it's kind of at the heart of why our society is so screwed up right now. And so I'm building the nonprofit and creating these spaces completely at my own cost because I really want to help people know that no matter what, their life is valuable and that they need to be here, that they belong. And so, yeah, the third space thing is truly weird that it comes at a cost. Like, I don't wanna pay $8 for a little iced coffee just to enjoy a space that usually people sit on their own too. People don't really interact a lot of times, and so that is truly what I'm trying to change and build and create, so I appreciate you brought that up.
Yeah, and so okay, so on the topic of your nonprofit, so then like how do you go about doing that? How do you create that connection without a cost? What's your plan for that?
A lot of partnerships and thoughtful planning, and we've had a lot of really wonderful people make small donations. I would say that a lot of it I do in my house, and I think that that's something we need to normalize is we need to start hosting things in our homes for other people and build community that way. But the other thing that we can be doing is just partnering with local coffee shops. You'd be surprised actually how many organizations and businesses will want to partner and do things at their spaces. I think that, yeah, the way I do it is just thoughtfully and a lot of hoping for the best, honestly.
Well, it sounds like a noble cause in that. So something that I'm always fascinated about when I talk to any person who clearly like has a mission, right? Like we've had a great conversation so far, but you clearly have a fire in you to push forward to this. Where does that fire come from?
There's kind of like a lot of reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. I would say it started very early for me because I was very isolated when I was young. I was bullied really severely. There's this story I tell sometimes about when I was a little girl. I had this friend group, and for whatever reason, I no longer fit in. I don't know what happened. I never will know what happened. But it was really interesting because one of the girls in the group lived next door, and she was having a pool party, and one of the girls forgot their swimsuits. and they came over, knocked on my door, and asked me if they could borrow a swimsuit for the party they're having that I wasn't invited to. And I looked at them and I'm like, because I was like maybe 8 years old at the time. I was just a little girl and I looked at them and I said, "Oh, can I come and join you guys?" And they looked at me and they're like, "No, we just need the swimsuit." So I just looked right at them. I said, "Sorry, I don't have anything for you guys." I closed the door. I went in and I cried for hours and I realized that was the moment I realized I didn't belong truly with them. And it was probably one of the most painful feelings I had as a kid, feeling that rejection and isolation. And it's when I first realized how important belonging really is.
Oh, go ahead.
I struggled growing up with my mental health. I struggled with depression. I was hospitalized as a teen and I navigated the system. And thankfully now I'm doing really, really well. I've been in remission for years now and I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful for that. But the thing that I think sparked me wanting to start a nonprofit and write a book and want to like change the whole freaking world was losing my best friend. And I think that when you go through loss is when you realize the value of life. You realize what's at stake. And that's truly, truly what I feel does not hit home for people is what's truly at stake with what's happening right now in our country. There are thousands of kids every day who consider ending their lives. There are probably millions of people in our country who feel alone and isolated and no one to talk to. When they go and try to get healthcare, they're told there's months-long wait list or that they find out they can't afford it. We're living in a time where there's a lot at stake and it feels like no one cares. And so I'm just trying to do what I can to show people that someone does care.
Message really hit home for me. Um, because I think especially when you're talking about losing people, for those of if you're under, I would say if you're under the age of 30 and you lose somebody like that close to you, whether it was, something that they did to themselves or something that happened naturally, whatever the case may be, it's just that comprehension of someone your own age not being here anymore really, really lands for people. I know that's for me, we're this whole journey of starting a blog and doing social media and writing a book and all this came from me because I was dating a woman for about a year and she died unexpectedly. And I'm the one who found her.
Um,
And
uh,
and it was it was natural causes, but nonetheless, like it was this horrible thing and it just like was this big kind of like, holy crap. First off, I have to take my mental health seriously because I didn't. I'm a classic guy from the Midwest. We didn't talk about these things. We bottle it up and don't deal with it. And I had to. And so that forced me to have this real, very real conversation with a therapist and very honest and get to the bottom of who I am and why this hit me in this way. And so
yeah.
that's where all this mission comes from. When you said that, it landed for me. And as someone who has had issues with suicidal ideation myself, it's something you're absolutely right. There are so many people that consider the notion that the world would be better off without them. And if more of us understood the exact number, we'd all do everything we could to stop it. But we just don't realize it. So how do we fix that?
I would love, $1 billion and I could fix it, but I
Okay, well,
personally
actually,
don't want
let me ask you a question. If I gave you $1 billion, what would you do with it? I don't, but
it might cost even more than that. But no,
it's okay.
so there's two immediate things I would do, and that is universal basic income and universal basic healthcare with true mental health parity. The way our system works right now, the parity in mental health really isn't, it's not truly equal. Mental health is not taken as seriously. So I think that making it truly equal to healthcare would be important. And then I talk about this national service program in my book that actually was suggested by Pete Buttigieg during his run for presidency, is where I first heard of the idea. And it's this idea that we have kids that are graduating high school who have no idea what the hell they want to do with their lives. We involve them in some type of service project where all of their basic needs are covered, like, housing, food, all of that. And then after a certain residency, like maybe 2 years, they can go to college for free. I really think that would make a big difference because right now, so many high school students feel like they have the world on their shoulders, that they're competing, and that if they don't get into college, their whole life is ruined, or they don't get a good SAT, they're like ready to jump off a bridge because holy shit, their whole life is ruined. There's a
Right.
lot of pain and pressure. And then there's also like, oh no, what do I do with these student loans? I think there's like a stat, I don't remember the exact stat, but it was like a huge number of people drop out of college the first year and then they're left with thousands and thousands in student loans. And it's just, so that's where I feel like that is a really, really good way to help is it would also get us more just important jobs like mental health providers. If they're able to go to school for free, we would just have it would just be great. It'd be really great.
That's fair. I understand where you're coming from there. The universal basic income piece, like, why does that feel so important to you?
Well, if you look at the so there are pilot studies around the world happening with it. If you look at some of the data, it's shown that people who are part of the pilot studies have significantly enhanced mental health. And that is kind of an obvious outcome of it because they're no longer stressed out about how they're going to afford food. So I think that's incredibly important. We also had literally universal basic income during the pandemic, theoretically, with the stimulus checks. And they did look at what people did with them. And a majority of people use those checks for their basic needs, like paying for food and basic necessities, rent, things like that. And they also found, some researchers found that those stimulus checks really helped people's mental health. So I really think that whether it's universal basic income, there's a conservative version called like the freedom dividend or something like that. There's different ways of talking about it, but I think it would be a obvious solution right now. Would it be long term? I don't know. But with the fact that there's literally a million kids that graduated college that could not get jobs this year. And these are kids even that went to Ivy Leagues. So there's a lot not being talked about in the media about the unemployment in young people, but a lot of us feel like we're absolutely screwed in this economy. And so if we don't have some sort of solution to meet our basic needs, it's gonna be a huge problem.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we could have this. You are definitely welcome back on this show anytime you
Oh,
like, because
thank you.
there are so many great points you made throughout this that I would love to dive in further. But I know we're short on time, so really to wrap things up, kind of if there was one thing though that you could wave a magic wand tomorrow and fix, what would that be for you?
I'm so glad you're ending with that because I wanna I want listeners to hear this one thing that they can do that's completely free. And that's the thing that I'm really trying to advocate for because anybody can do it. And that is get out of your own head and start valuing and caring about the people in your lives like you never have before. And that means checking in on the people that you love every day. It means truly taking an interest in the people of your lives. Like I had this conversation with my friend today. She's like, "I'm a writer and none of my friends have ever asked to see my writing." This is so common. We have so many things that are beautiful about us and our friends and our family, and we never dive deeper because we're so in our own heads. So what I advocate for is that we find ways to make sure that the people in our lives belong and know that they're valued and that without a doubt their life matters.
So beautifully said. I really appreciate that sentiment. So, Allie, where can people find you? Where can they learn more? Where can they find your book? Let us know.
Yeah. You can find my book at outofocusbook.com. I'm making a documentary. You can find it at crisisgeneration.com. And then my nonprofit is the Belonging Lab, sd.org. And I am at Aly Vredenburgh on Instagram.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, Allie, thank you one more time for joining me today. I really appreciated the conversation. As I mentioned, you're welcome anytime. And as always, be kind to each other, everybody, and we'll see you next time.